Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Rabbi Gold is no stranger to this community, having come here in 1959 at the behest of so many of our Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Yaakov Ruderman Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, to start a branch of the Yeshiva Ner Yisrael, later on being the builder of Congregation B'nai Torah, where he served with distinction for many years and grew the congregation. Later he made Aliyah and was vital and active and passionate about the message of religious Zionism and continues to do so in his community at Har Nof, and still maintains a very, very close relationship with so many people here in the community. I've been asked to announce a couple of things. Number one, Rabbi Gold has a website, RabbiShalomGold.com. That's Shalom, S-H-O-L-O-M. RabbiShalomGold.com. There are over 1,500 shiurim on the website that you can download for free. So no more excuses for the commute for not listening to a shiur from Rabbi Gold. Also, the book is for sale in the back of the room. We would only ask that during Rabbi Gold's talk, you remain seated, and then after the talk is over, you can go. And we thank Israel's Judaica Center for being our bookseller for this evening and for being our partner in so many important projects. If you like the book, which of course there's no question that you will love the book, please send a review to Amazon.com, because every time a review is sent to Amazon.com for a book, it goes up in the rating and becomes more prominent, and that results in more sales. We're going to ask Rabbi Gold to speak at this time, share some of his reflections, and then we'll open up the floor to some Q&A. It's a tremendous privilege to be able to welcome back Rav Shalom Gold.
Thank you very much. I have to say that I'm a bit emotional seeing so many faces that go back so many years. I begin to remember so many of the things that took place. It's 1959, how many years ago was that? 55? 56, huh? It was a long time ago. You may not know, there are only a few here who will know, but Toronto wasn't always what Toronto is now. When I arrived, Bathurst Street was paved only until Shepherd. From Shepherd on and further, it was forest. Finch Avenue was a dirt road with a lot of potholes. There was no bus service. And here I'm sent into this town to start a yeshiva, and the yeshiva is requiring everybody to stay in the dormitory all week. It became a major effort to make sure that we could get everybody to the yeshiva Sunday morning, get them home Friday afternoon. After I bought a car, my Chariot, a Valiant. You don't even know what a Valiant is. It was something like the Model T Ford, and with my Valiant, I took them back and forth. There was a great excitement. I think those who are here, and there are a few from those years, there was the excitement that we were indeed, and in fact, we were building something. We were making something new. Toronto had magnificent institutions. It had reached the point of high school, and here was the moment at which it's going to go one step further. And so many things happened. As a result, I think I report in the book that 2 years after the yeshiva came into existence, there was one of the Taira Balabatim, Shia Wortzman. Who remembers Shia Wortzman? You remember Shia Wortzman? He comes over to me and he says, Rabbi Gold, we did for the boys, now we have to do for the girls. And with that I told him, Shia, call a meeting, and Beis Yaakov was born. And then one after another, institution after institution. Toronto, 55 years later, is an Ir ve'em b'Yisrael. So some memories. It was very difficult. Those first few years with a lot of work. There were also embarrassing moments. There were funny moments. Funny, huh? I don't know where to begin. So I'll begin with a funny. No. An embarrassing moment. Because the embarrassing moment may very well present the story for the rest of the 55 years. The Beis Medrash, by the way, it was 625 Finch Avenue West. It was the Tyrrell estate. I never told the parents. I visited many homes in order to convince parents to send their children to the yeshiva. And this was a whole new idea that they're going to stay in the yeshiva all week, come home for Shabbos. One Shabbos a month they'll stay in the yeshiva. This was a very, very new idea. Of course, the most important thing is that I had to assure the parents that their children are not going to be rabbis. You understand? They will not be rabbis. I assured them. I don't think it worked out all the time, but I assured them. So here it is. We have the yeshiva. We turned one. It was one building. I never told them that there were reports that it was a haunted house. Mir hat mir nicht gefehlt, you understand. Parents will know it's a haunted house. But we de-haunted it. So here we had the one floor was the Beis Medrash and classrooms, one floor. The bottom floor was the dining room. Top floor was the dormitory. Everything self-contained in this. It was a very beautiful estate, 13 acres of rolling green hills and whispering brooks and the Don River going down through the bottom. It was a very beautiful place. It was something special. So here it is. One day we're in the Beis Medrash and they bring in some elderly gentleman whom they wanted to convince to give a few dollars to the yeshiva. He was quite elderly. He must have been about 80, and and he couldn't hear well, so he spoke loudly. Now, I don't know why I'm telling this story, because I'm going to get so embarrassed telling you the story. So he says to me, Rabbi Gold, you're married or you are a boy? You know what I answered? I'm a boy. The kids in the Beis Medrash, they started laughing. But you see what happened over here? He set me up for it. I learned something from it. In other words, are you for peace or settlement? Are you for the Iran deal or for war? These are complex questions where you set the poor fellow up. Reingefallen. I've been trying now for 55 years to prove that I'm a big boy. Well, then there were other things. An embarrassing moment was, and I have to say this only because I want you to know the truth. The truth. I think it was in the middle of July of 1959. By the way, I arrived right after Lag Baimer. I came from the yeshiva in Baltimore. I was really a Williamsburg boy. You'll find out all about that in the book, if you buy it. Find out all about that. And here it is. I arrived. So let's go step by step. I arrived on a Friday after Lag Baimer. And my first stop was 16 Strathern Road. 16, you people don't even know anything about it, but they tell me that the Jewish community is beginning to move down again south of Eglinton. 16 Strathern Road was the home of Minnie and Maya Lebovic. That's where I spent the first 2 weeks that I was here. I made great sacrifices for Torah. I'll tell you what sacrifice I made for Torah. My Lubavitch liked fishing. Minnie Lubavitch cleaned the fish. I hate fish, and I ate it for Torah's sake. I don't know how I did it. Anyway, so here it is, that first Shabbos in Toronto, Friday night at the Lubavitchs, and then, of course, the great story. I got to tell you the story. Up the block, 72 was the Sieglers. Between the Lubavitchs and the Sieglers was Maya Gasner and the Weitzes. I don't remember the exact address. I mean, you have to know the street. I mean, you people, I take a look at you, you have no clue of what was going on here then. But Shabbos in the morning, I was invited to eat at the home of Dr. and Mrs. Julius Kuhl. Little did I know then, of course, that one day we would be Mishpucha, his grandson, married. I have a brother-in-law here, Mendel and Judy. Their daughter married a grandson of the Kuhls. Anyway, that was one of the great moments of my life. It was one of the great moments of my life. Dr. Julius Kuhl was a connoisseur of the arts. And here is this yeshiva bocher, you understand. I was afraid to tell you that on the way, my hat box broke. So I arrived with a hat box, tied up with string. I looked very dignified arriving in Toronto. Anyway, I come walking into the Kuhl home, and it was one of my finest moments. The walls were full of all sorts of beautiful works of art. And here it is, this yeshiva bacher looks at the wall and he says, Julius, that's a Renoir. It was a Renoir. And Julius Kuhl looked at me, Rabbi. And of course, you have to know how to do this. I look down, like very modestly, like, to know a Renoir, what are you talking about? I can name any painting that I'm going to see. So maybe it's worthwhile telling you the story, because this is one of these classic stories that's going to should end up sometime in one of these Hashgacha Pratis books. A few months before I left the yeshiva, there was a little scandal brewing in the yeshiva. There was a period of time, and you won't understand this all, but I'll explain. I'll be very patient with you. There used to be book clubs and record clubs. If you would become a member of a book club, you had a choice of a number of free books, and you didn't really have to continue paying for anything. There were record clubs. Now, you don't even know what records are. These were black plastic things, that you put into a pataphone or a gramophone, and music came out. So if you joined the record club, you were able to get free all of Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, not Renoir. I know which one is a painter, So what happened was somebody came up with a great idea in the yeshiva. You see, it's past the statute of limitations. I can tell you the story. Somebody came up with the idea that if he applies under a number of different names, he can get all of the books that are being given free, or all of the records. So, for example, I was, maybe to save the guilty, I'll use my name. I never apply to any of these. You'd send in for a membership on the name Shalom Gold. Then you'd send another one under the name Shlomo Goldberg. The third one would be Shuli Gladstone. You understand? And then, anyway, the end was the yeshiva in the morning was being piled up with books and records and records and books. Until, of course, the FBI found out that at 4411 Garrison Boulevard, you understand, there are a lot of people with the same sounding names. Anyway, it was a matter of taking the Rosh Yeshiva to Alcatraz or coming up with a deal. So they came up with a deal. The deal was that everybody had to return all the books and the records. And the Rosh Yeshiva, of course, this was the classic. The Rosh Yeshiva was given a list of the offenders, and he started calling in the list. But he'd call in Shalom Gold. Okay, Shalom Gold would go in. The next name on the list was Shlomo Goldberg. So he tells Shalom Gold, Shik mir rein Shlomo Goldberg. So now, what's Shalom Gold supposed to do? So there were a number of fellows that just turned around and walked back into the office till somebody brought it to the Rosh Yeshiva's attention that only one out of each 10 names was a student in the yeshiva. But anyway, during this turbulent period of time, I walked into a dormitory room. I was looking for one of the fellows in the yeshiva, and I see a big book about French Impressionists. And I opened it up. And I sat, and I read, and I read, and I read. By the time I finished the book from cover to cover, I was certainly Baltimore's expert on French Impressionists. But then I felt bad afterwards. Bittul Torah, an hour and a half. Little did I know that the Rabbi Shalom was setting me up for that Shabbos morning that I'm going to walk into Julius Kuhl's house and say, Julius, Renoir. By the way, somebody brought me a gift here, a book on Renoir. Then there was another great, this was a bad story. The Globe and Mail interviewed me in July of 1959. Scout's honor, I tell you the truth. I had prepared with me a list of the Balabatim of the yeshiva. The president, Herschel Rubinstein, Maya Lebavik, Julius Kuhl, Sol Siegler, Harry Batnick, and I gave them the list. These are the people who invited me here. But I didn't get it. Their big story was a 24-year-old is building a college, a yeshiva college in Toronto. Next day, there was a big, full-page article on this young rabbi, the boy. There was a big article about him. No mention of a single balabas. The balabatim was so upset that we fragnished. And I swear, if I would have had touching history, I would have swear on a stack of touching histories that I said the truth. But it didn't make it. But it helped me. I learned a lesson from every one of these goofs. I learned a lesson. About 22, 23 years ago, there was a very religious newspaper in Eretz Yisrael that sent a reporter to interview me. I, at the time, together with Rabbi Avram Shapir Zecher Tzadik Levracha, who was former chief rabbi, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of Merkaz Harav, we in fact worked together on establishing an organization of over 1,000 rabbis in Eretz Yisrael to fight the Oslo Accords. So they came to interview me. When they interviewed me, you know what I remembered? I remembered the Globe and Mail. So I told the fellow, you can't print a thing unless I see the article before it goes in. If you dare put anything into the paper, I will sue you and the paper. After the interview, about 2-3 hours later, my fax machine starts moving, and there comes out the article. The article basically painted a picture of me being the boss of this whole organization, and I'm telling Rabbi Avram Shapir exactly what to do and when to do it. Es ist mir schwarz geworden vor die Augen. It was a terrible, terrible article. And then there were a whole bunch of quotes. I never said a single one of the quotes. So I called the fellow who wrote it. I said, what's going on over here? So he says, Ataloya, you don't know? Kacha kotvim, that's the way we write. We make up quotes. Since then, I'm very wary of what I read. I read in the press. But I think what you need now, you need a sort of a little lighter touch. During that first summer, the biggest job was to find students for the yeshiva. To find students. I came in May. By the end of June, I didn't have one student who was ready to go to the yeshiva. By the first week in July, I already had visions of the great Torah builder returning to the yeshiva at the beginning of Elul, and I failed. I tried, but I failed. Until one Motzei Shabbos, I'm sitting at the home of Maya Lubavik, and I get a phone call from a woman by the name of Ruth Greif. Aleh Shalom. She says, Rabbi, I don't care what any of the other people are going to do. I had already been in many homes. I'm sending my son Hershey to your yeshiva. That's all I needed. Within a matter of a week or two, the rest were signed up. But there's one fella someplace here in the audience, Akiva Chaim, known then as Leslie Rosenthal. His parents lived in Sudbury, and his father was the rabbi of Sudbury. He heard about this yeshiva that was going to start, and in March yet, he wasn't in touch with me, and he was really the first one. But somebody from Sudbury, that's going to make a difference to the people here in Toronto. But when Hershey Greif, all of us Shalom, what a wonderful, wonderful young man. Anyway, so the big job was visiting homes. The yeshiva started. It was in middle already of the first year, and now we have to begin to interview for the coming year. I had to start going to homes. So I had a roommate. Let me explain how things worked. On the second floor, that was the dormitory, there were the servants' quarters. Now we turned these service quarters into the staff headquarters. And the only 2 Hebrew words those boys ever learned was, I put up a sign, Haknisa Asura. You can't go in there. Anyway, one morning, one of the Balabatim broke that taboo. Now listen what happened. I had a roommate. I wasn't married. I was a boy. We know that already. I wasn't married. So I had a roommate, some unknown character by the name of Nata Schiller, who was to go on to become the builder of an awesome empire of Kiruv and Torah called Or Sameach. Incidentally, if we're talking about that already, one of the shiurim was said by another absolute unknown, Noach Weinberg, Zichreina Livracha, who was going to go on to build international Eish HaTorah. Watch the people that we had over here. So you have these 2 great men, and me, who just ended up writing a book, that's all. You understand? And there was another very important fellow, but he came on the scene about 2 years later. I was interviewing people for the job of dormitory counselor. And I took him through the dorm, And I showed him exactly how I want beds made. I showed him how to check under the bed if it's clean, what to do with the sinks. And it seemed to me the fellow was intelligent enough to understand exactly what I wanted from a dorm counselor. Baruch Taub. So you can imagine already what a cast of characters we had over there in this Neria soil at 625 Finch Avenue West. We had Rabbi Chaim Mintz, who became the Mashgiach of the Staten Island Yeshiva. For about 3 months, we had Gershon Weiss, who's the Rosh Yeshiva in Staten Island. And then in the first year, also nearly a good part of the year, Rav Yochanan Zweig, the Rosh Yeshiva of Miami, married a Toronto girl, Ola Bavik, all right? I mean, we were all young fellows, but wow, what a bunch of young fellows. So here it is. In the second year, I decided that I'm taking Nata Shila along with me when I go visiting homes. So this is what would happen. About 5, 6 o'clock, we'd leave the Beis Medrash, shine our shoes, shave, brush our teeth, get all dressed, and off we go. I'd have appointments set up here, there. One night, we came home very late, and we overslept the next morning. I mean, these things, they're very rare, but they happen. We overslept. But one of the Balabatim wanted to talk to me. So the first thing he did that was wrong, he passed that door on which it said, Haknisa Asura. If I would have had a shotgun, you understand? You know what? We do to trespassers. Anyway, here it is. We're both sleeping, and we hear a voice. Shalom. That's me. Oh. The two of us, we're out of it. And then comes the great line. Nata turns over and he says, Shalom, did you call room service? I didn't, he said. Anyway, the trespasser was gone quicker than you could say, Haknisa Asura. He was out and gone. It was not easy. It was not an easy job. There were a lot of difficulties, but I have to say, the students, I have such nachas from the students. They've all become, in a sense, pillars of the community. Year after year, it was a wonderful, wonderful group of people. And it laid the groundwork for what was going to come later. I mean, so much more was going to come later. They were going to pave Bathurst Street. They were even going to get it paved up until Patricia, so we could build B'nai Torah congregation. That was a few years later. That was a lot of fun too. B'nai Torah, wonderful, wonderful people. The real message, and this is important that you know, the book that I wrote seems to be the story of my life. But the story of my life is really secondary to the greater story that's being told over there. I'm only using my life as sort of the vehicle by which I span the most awesome 70 years in the history of a people. The last 70 years of Jewish history are unparalleled in all of world history. From the depths of destruction to what Eretz Yisrael is today, it's unbelievable. By the way, I'll let you in on another secret. I had learned in yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael in 55 and 56. I came back to the yeshiva in September of 56. And then, of course, I don't remember anymore what I wrote in the book. I don't remember anymore what's in the book, what isn't in the book. But I came back and the Rosh Yeshiva threw me out of the yeshiva. How do you like that? It wasn't the first time I'd been thrown out of yeshivas. I remember that great confrontation with the Rosh Yeshiva, who 2 years later was going to send me to Toronto, you understand? Boy, would he have been in trouble. So I told him, listen, Rosh Yeshiva, there's a Gemara. And we had learned it together some years earlier. Kol she'omer lecho bal habayit, whatever the owner of a house tells you, asay, do it, chutz mitzay. Unless he tells you to leave. You don't have to listen to him. So I told Rosh Yeshiva, Kol she'omer lecho bal habayit, asay, chutz mitzay. I'm putting my suitcase in my room. You want to get me out of this yeshiva, you call the police. All of a sudden, he backed off. Nay, I didn't mean it. Okay. Anyway, came back to the yeshiva. My plans were that I was going to finish my degree in the spring of 1959, and I was going to go on Aliyah. I planned on going on Aliyah the summer of 1959. Toronto was a detour. But what a detour. It took 25 years until we finally made it to Eretz Yisrael, and we're there 35 yees now. Hodu Hashem ki tov ki liolam chasdi, the finest thing we ever did. So the point of the book is not my story. The point of the book is to develop what I call a history consciousness. We're living in such historic times. You have to be able to appreciate it. You have to appreciate it. The only way you can appreciate it is if you're plugged into the Jewish past. I remember I was finished with Shimon Peres when I heard him say, the past bores me. Oh, no. The past is what everything is based on. I'll give you an example, classic example. In the month of March, this past March, the Prime Minister of the State of Israel spoke before both houses of Congress. He was being attacked from all sides. In the religious press, especially the English religious press. What kind of business is this? What a chutzpah. President Obama is the president of the great Malchus Shel Chesed, the United States of America. We're in Golus, and in Golus the way you approach leaders is by begging for mercy. God, I read it. I can get all upset. I needed a ton of Valiums to get over that. Anyway, he spoke before Congress. I'll tell you exactly how I felt. I was crying like a baby watching him speak. And I'll tell you exactly why. There was one image that was there in front of my eyes during the entire speech. The image was October 6th, 1943. On October 6, 1943, 400 Rabbanim came to Washington to beg Roosevelt to do something to save whatever is left of European Jewry. 400 Rabbanim. Google it. You'll see. Rabbanim Gedolim V'Chashuvim. Rabbi Yosef Dov Halevi Soloveitchik was there. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was there. Rabbi Eliezer Silver was there. Even the one who read the proclamation spoke with a heavy accent in English because there were very few American-born rabbis at the time. 400 Rabbanim marched from Union Station to the White House. And Roosevelt wouldn't see them. Fast forward 70 years, a prime minister of a state of Israel is speaking before both houses of Congress, and the whole world is listening to him. That's a big difference. That's an awesome difference. And that's what's going through my mind as I watch him speaking. What the Rabbi Shalom has done for us in these last 70 years. What a difference. What a difference. So therefore I had no patience. Oh, he shouldn't speak. This, yeah. By the way, it becomes very clear now that what the Prime Minister was saying before Congress is very, very true. A lot of people are beginning to question this great deal with Iran. We're the ones who are in grave danger, and they're making decisions for us. Come. We pull this all the time. You know, in days of old, Darshanim used to speak about 3-4 hours, and there's somebody who would always bring him a drink in the middle. You understand? So my wife brought me a drink. By the way, what the Hashiva didn't know when he sent me to Toronto, and when that fellow who asked me, are you married or are you a boy? He didn't know that I was going to become married. Thank God, to a girl who walked into the yeshiva on Purim of 60. On Purim of 60. I can't tell you that story. No, that's not what I meant. I didn't even notice her. But that wasn't true. I did. And the rest is history. It seems the girls in town had heard that this yeshiva was going to have a Purim play. You understand, a Purim play? Oh, it was a great play. It was not the Schiller and myself. We were the main actors. And the top figure was, here it was, Reb Herschel Rubinstein, who was a big Tomech Torah. He was close to Reb Aaron Kotler. Herschel Rubinstein gave the seed money to build the yeshiva. So, of course, you know, on Purim, all fun is clean. So the main actor was me, was Rubel Herschelstein. And the main song was, his business was the chicken business. So we made up a song. Metar Nizain a chicken. Metar, you know, the idea that we have to get out there and we have to do things. It was a wonderful time. But I'm talking about Netanyahu, and I'm talking about history. I'm talking about the last 70 years. So I want to do two things. I want to learn with you. You're going to you won't know how to handle this, but just wait. Just have patience with me. I'm going to learn an editorial that appeared last week in the Toronto Star. You've been by many shiurim in the world. You've heard shiurim and Chumash, Tanakh, Gemara, Fragnisht. I'm going to give you a shiur in an editorial in the Toronto Star. I read this editorial, and I had so many emotions, so many feelings. I was overwhelmed. That it was last Monday. That Monday night, I wasn't able to sleep. In the middle of the night, I got up and I decided I'm just going to write whatever comes to mind. Here's the editorial. Just briefly, refugee crisis tests us all. There are 60 million refugees in the world today. They are a serious problem. Most of them are coming from Middle Eastern countries. I mean, Syria is imploding. Iraq, Lebanon, Libya, frag nicht. Africa, countries are destroying themselves utterly. And the world is faced with a major crisis of refugees. Canada's response has been uneven on Prime Minister Stephen Harper's watch, but Harper, we Jews, we like Harper. I'm just reading what the Star says. I told you already, I don't necessarily believe everything I read in newspapers, but that has nothing to do with it all. Harper has said that in the decade between 2009 and 2019, Canada is going to permit into the country 44,300 refugees. Out of 60 million, 44,300. That's 4,430 a year. Okay? Opposition leaders Thomas Mulcair and Justin Trudeau both promised to do better if they form a government after the election. Whoever takes the reins of Canada's foreign policy should step up the effort and use what moral leverage we have to urge other more powerful, more affluent actors, the United States, the European Union, and major Asian and Latin American countries come to mind. They have to do more of their share. This is a profound human crisis. 60 million people are homeless. They're most probably hungry. They're exhausted. And you read the articles in the paper of 10,000 running across the border into Hungary. It's unbelievable what's going on in the world. The UN is under strain as never before. It needs 20 billion to get into places such as Yarmouk, that's a Palestinian refugee camp, and all the refugees in Syria, Iraq, Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt. The outlook for too many refugees and displaced people is bleak. Okay, I don't have to read the rest. So I started writing. I'm just going to read what I wrote. The refugee crisis, first of all, is of their own making. It's not some outside power that has invaded Syria. They created it themselves. That may be important. Incidentally, all of these countries for 68 years now have not welcomed the Palestinian refugees who fled Palestine. So now you know what? The Rebbeinu halt cheshbon. So now they're becoming the refugees. So it's no surprise that no one is welcoming them. Another thought that occurred to me just 4 years ago, the great enemies of Israel that we had to be concerned about was Syria and Egypt. They're off the list. Syria doesn't exist. And thank God we marched through the country to keep the Golan. Ha'am im ha-Golan. So the Eibishter Rapiten, if we would have ever given 1 inch of the Golan. And there were people who said yes for peace. What hashgacha pratis that the Jews of Arab lands 68 years ago left en masse and came to Eretz Yisrael. Can you imagine what would happen to Jews if there would be large Jewish communities in all of those Arab lands? They would be slaughtered. Then another thing. 70 years ago, there were refugees. You know where these refugees were from? They were from the DP camps. And they made their way across Europe to get to a port on the northern part of the Mediterranean. And in order to cross in unreliable boats in order to come to their own country. The migrants are now moving in the other direction. Out of Asia and out of Africa, they're crossing the Mediterranean in the other direction. There's some kind of a divine retribution that's taking place over here. Most significant of all, and when this occurred to me, do you understand? There are 60 million refugees in the world. There isn't a single Jew in the world who's a refugee today. The Ukrainians are coming to Eretz Yisrael. French Jews are coming to Eretz Yisrael. Any one of us, we remember our parents and our grandparents, they were Flüchtlingen. You remember the word Flüchtlingen? Refugees. Jews were refugees for 1900 years. Not a single Jew in the world is a refugee. Not only not a single Jew in the world is a refugee, the only country in the whole world that is taking in thousands and tens of thousands and providing them is Eretz Yisrael. No other place. When 1,300,000 Russian Jews came in 1990, 91, 92, they made a cheshbon that in the United States it would mean some 50 million immigrants coming into the United States. America would collapse under the weight of the social needs, the housing needs, all of that. They couldn't take it. And this little country has taken it. Taken it, provided for them. They have homes. Homes. What are you talking about? Is there a place in Eretz Yisrael you can go today where they're not building? Building. The country is building. I say it's the power of a picture. There are a few pictures that for me sum up the history of 70 years. One picture is the little boy who has his hands raised in surrender. There's a second picture. That second one, when I see that, I'm a basket case. There's a picture of Jews, long lines of Jews, walking across the Alps in the snow. After the Second World War is over, in 45, 46, they're walking across the Alps just to get to some place where they might get onto an unseaworthy boat that's going to take them to Eretz Yisrael. And of course, His Majesty's mighty navy was there to stop them. What a shanda. There's another picture. The pictures change. The next picture is the three soldiers, the three paratroopers looking up at the Kotel on the 28th day of Iyar, 1967. I add a fourth picture because I have a personal interest in the fourth picture. One of the three wars that were fought in Gaza after the disengagement that was going to bring peace and security to all of Israel. One of them was called Oferet Yitzukah, molten lead, Oferet Yitzukah. So we had an Einikel who was there, front lines. They went in to Gaza on the night of the last day of Hanukkah. And there are pictures of the soldiers. All of them are lighting Hanukkah menorahs. And after they lit the menorahs, they handed in their cell phones. Couldn't have cell phones. By morning, they were deep in Gaza already. That picture to me is extremely important. You'll read the book. You'll see one of the more poignant moments over there is 2 weeks later. That Einikel who was out there in the front lines, his younger brother got married, and he couldn't come to the wedding. It was too dangerous to take him out from the front lines. So his commander gave him his cell phone for 30 seconds. He called in to say Mazel tov, I'm not coming to the wedding. The rest of the story you'll read in the book. I'll start crying if I tell the rest of the story. Pictures tell an awesome story of what has happened in 70 years. From a little boy with his hands up to Israeli soldiers moving into Gaza after lighting Hanukkah candles. Sorry, but I'm in Toronto now. When I think of the demands of Harper that he has to do more than take $4,430 a year out of 60 million, we cannot forget the infamous statement of a Canadian government official during the Second World War. None is too many. There was no place in Canada for 20,000 Jewish children. What a difference. We don't need Canada. We don't need the United States. We don't need anybody anymore. The Rabbi has taken care of us. I'm coming to the end. But now, I don't want you should walk out and say that, Rabbi Gold gave a shir on an editorial in the Star, you understand? Shanda nach Harpe, a Shanda nach Harpe. So I want to tell you something about 4 or 5 words in the Haftorah that we said this Shabbos. Roni akora lo yolodo. Sing, you barren woman who has not given birth. Because you know what's going to be? Ki rabim b'nei shomema mi b'nei be'ula. For more are the children of the desolate one than the children of the married wife. What's it mean? Who are b'nei shomema, the son of the barren one? Eretz Yisrael is called the place that's shomema. And the Navi is saying there will be a day that the b'nei shomema will be more than the b'nei be'ula. The b'nei be'ula, we will see who it could mean. So I want to tell you 2 pshatim. One is, there was my wife showed it to me. I must have watched it 10 times. A video clip of about 10 minutes. A demographer by the name of Dr. Guy Bechor. You gotta hear this. You gotta hear and listen to every word. Dr. Guy Bechor says the following. There is a problem in the world today. The birth rate has been dropping drastically. Across Europe, the birth rate is at 1 to 2 children per family, which means they are not reproducing themselves. That's France, Belgium, Germany, Holland, England. They're just not reproducing. In California, there is a movement of not getting married, or if getting married, no children at all. 0 children. 22 years ago, one of the important considerations for the Oslo Accords was, we have to make peace now, because any day now we're going to be overrun by the massive birth rate of the Arab world. The entire Jewish state is going to turn into an Arab state. They're having children. Guy Bechor says, the Arab birth rate plummeting in Drerd. In Drerd. 2 birth rates. The settlers are 7 to 8 children per family. And then he says, the biggest surprise of all, secular families in Israel are having 3 to 4 children. It used to be 1 child and a dog. They're having 3 to 4 children. And then came most probably the peak of his study. They asked the California people who had decided not to have children, why have you made that decision? So they said, because quality of life. They interviewed secular families in Eretz Yisrael, Chilayim. They interviewed secular families in Eretz Yisrael that were having children, and they asked them, why are you having children? You know what the answer was? Quality of life. We were concerned about the Arab birth rate. Rabim b'nei shomema mi b'nei ba'ula. The sons of the desolate Eretz Yisrael are going to be greater than all the others. That's one pshat. There was an article in the Jerusalem Post in 1990. Listen very carefully. You are listening very carefully. I can see it on every face. An article appeared in the Jerusalem Post. This fellow predicted that by the end of the decade, the end of the century, or soon afterwards, man, woman, or child was going to walk off a plane onto the tarmac at Ben Gurion Airport, and at that moment, a dramatic demographic change was going to take place. When that man, woman, or child was going to walk off the plane onto the earth of Eretz Yisrael would become the largest Jewish community in the world. An Eretz Yisrael that had 400,000 in 1939, 600,000 in 1948, had been one of the smallest Jewish communities in the world, would become the largest Jewish community in the world. It happened. It happened. That's exactly the situation right now. The largest Jewish community of the world is in Eretz Yisrael. This fellow in this article also said that there was a very important milestone that had been reached and nobody even noticed it. Sometime around 1967, the population in Eretz Yisrael was larger than the number of Jews who lived in Eretz Yisrael in the peak period of Jewish population during BAYT Sheni, the Second Temple era. Studies have shown that the maximum number of Jews that were in Eretz Yisrael during the second Bet HaMikdash were 2,350,000. Most of the Jews were in Asia Minor and most of them in Bavel. And Rabbi Korobkin can corroborate it. What does the Kuzri say? Shelo yochlu lihipaded mi mishkenotehem v'inyonehem. They couldn't leave their homes and their businesses in Bavel. They didn't come. They didn't come. And then the king of the Khazars say, you're talking about the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, and you're sitting over here in Spain. You're a phony. There are two girsayos. When I learned the Kuzri, it was Hovashtani Melech Kuzar. You have shamed me, king of the Khazars. But I think the later nusach is Matzata et mekom cherpati. You have found my shame. Mendel gave me a copy. And I'm going through my Mishlishi. Okay. So this fellow in this article in the Jerusalem Post says that it was a major milestone that had been passed. That there are more Jews in Eretz Yisrael than there ever were at the time of BAYT Sheni. And we didn't even notice it. Ki rabim b'nei shomei mami b'nei bo'ula. Here I believe the Malbim comes nearly close to that, saying that there will be more Jews in Eretz Yisrael in future times than there were in the period of BAYT Sheni. A few psukim in Navi, and we know what's happening today. For 1900 years, nobody could understand what Yeshayahu was talking about. I want to make one thing very clear. Don't think that I'm so brilliant and I remember articles from the Jerusalem Post in 1990. I remember that article because I wrote it. Rabim b'nei be'ulami b'nei shomema. It's awesome what we are seeing today. And there are so many people that walk around either with complaints, it's not fum enough, it's not this enough, bash, meh. And they can't see what's unfolding before their very eyes. The Sharei Tshuva Rabbeinu Yonah says, it's a mitzvah saseh lihidbonein bechazdei Hashem. It's a mitzvah saseh to study the kindness of God. I'm reminded, there was a publisher who wanted to publish this book, Touching History, but they wanted me to take out one page. Much to my shame, I considered it for about 5 seconds. There's a page in there. There may even be more than one page. And they caught that page. They caught me. They got me. I said that I cannot for the life of me understand if you walk around on Yom Ha'atzmaut like you lost your best friend and it's Tisha B'Av, you're frum. But if you come to Gold Shul in Har Nof and you say Hallel with a bracha, you're mezruchnik. I don't understand. What are they talking about? Yidbonenu chazdei Hashem, the Rabbi Hashem is pouring out His chesed to us. We have to recognize, we have to realize it. We have to thank Him for it. I'm going to end with the coup de grace. Has nothing to do with my book. Nothing to do with my book. This was a joint project of my wife and myself. And you can do the same thing. I don't know, one night she tells me, Google Israel agriculture. When you go home, Google Israel agriculture. Make sure you have your seatbelt on. Understand? This is not going to be simple. 2.5 pages. 2.5 pages, that's all. In these 2.5 pages, there's a description, and the words that are used by those anti-Semites of Wikipedia about Israel's agriculture, they use terms like global player, world power. Rabbeinu Shalom. You got to read it. This is a country, of course, that was barren and dead for 1900 years. I've always said, I think I wrote that in the book. I want to be the one that's going to take Mark Twain by the hand and walk with him through Emek Yisrael. He had described Emek Yisrael, I think, in 1867. It's dry, it's dead, it's arid. Nothing lives here, nothing can grow here. So garnished, garnished. We have son and daughter-in-law family who live in Givat HaMoreh in Afula. From Givat HaMoreh, that's in Shoftim someplace, go look for it, by Gidon. From Givat HaMoreh, you see Emek Yisrael lying before you there. It's an awesome sight. That same Emek Yisrael that Mark Twain described as dead. Nothing will ever grow here. It's awesome. It's awesome. So the Wikipedia on agriculture Israel describes all of the areas in which Israel, that has no more than 22,000 acres of land that is being grown, is a world player in the field of agriculture. You got to read it. Don't trust me. Then I came to one sentence. The one sentence blew my mind away. This is it. Jewish cows give more milk than any other cows in the world. Lach nicht, Chavra. And it says outstrips the United States, the European Union, Japan, and Australia. Australia's stomach shanana harpa. A Jewish cow gives more than 11,000 liters a year. An Australian cow is the kind that Paro saw in his dream. It's 5,000 liters a year. So I called him, Bela, come here, look what I read. I said to her, that's the Pshat Eretz Zavas Cholav. God describes his land as a land flowing with milk and honey. Let me ask you, did you ever stop? Did you ever stop to think about it? There's Cholav Dvash in Canada. There's Cholav Dvash in America. There's no probably more Cholav and more Dvash. There's Cholav Dvash in England. How many countries in the world don't have Cholav Dvash? What's the big deal? The very first time that the Rebbeinu Shalom speaks to Moshe by the sneh, twice he tells him that I'm taking him to the land, Eretz Zavas Cholav Dvash. Big deal. What's the big deal? You know what? It is a big deal. Because the Cholav and Dvash of Eretz Yisrael is infinitely different than the Cholav and Dvash of the rest of the world. Then my wife tells me that she heard a shir from a Weitman, who is the Rav HaMachshir of Tenuva. He says, not only that, the only cows in the world that have to be milked 3 times a day are the cows of Eretz Yisrael. Elsie, move over. But wait a minute. So I was left with one problem. What about Dvash? Dvash is talking about dates. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was a fellow by the name of David Wolf. It was you. He sent me an email that there's something doing with dates in the country. And then must have been 2 or 3 weeks later, it was before Sukkot, and there was an item in the paper that at the president's residence, they're going to be showing for the first time a tree that's called the Abraham tree. The largest date in the world is being grown in Eretz Yisrael. That's Dvash. Eretz, Zavas, Cholav, Udvash. It's different. Qualitatively different. Because there's a bracha. The Rabbi Shalom is pouring out his kindness to his people. I believe with perfect faith, I said it in Shul. I don't think, we're not going to suffer, but we have a grave responsibility to do whatever we can. I have no patience for anybody who trivializes Yom Ha'atzmaut. He has no understanding of history. He has no knowledge of the past. He doesn't know how to look at what's taking place before our eyes day by day. The purpose of the book was not my story. I just happen to have been zeicha to live in that period. Can you give me that book? I'll give it to you right back. If you want to know where my neshama is, let me tell you the following. You want to read this book and understand it? The only thing you can do before you start reading it is you can look at the pictures. But after you've looked at the pictures and you start reading the book, so you have to begin with a page on which 2 psukim in Yeshayahu appear, Leman Tzion lo echeshe uleman Yerushalayim lo eshkod. You must read the preface. And then you have to read the acknowledgments. In the acknowledgments, of course, could I have written acknowledgments without thanking Judy and Mendel? Well, kidding, of course. And what about my wife, Bela? And of course, I give thanks to Bonnie Silver, who really was very helpful. But then the last acknowledgement, that's the one, that's really the whole book. Thanks to the Rabbi Shalom, I express boundless gratitude for granting my generation the zchut to live through this awesome period in Jewish history and be active participants in it. I marvel every day as I look out upon Yerushalayim and compare it with the city I first saw in 1955. It was scarred by the presence of an ugly concrete wall, cutting it in half and denying Jews access to the Kotel. That wall was like a knife in the heart of Klal Yisrael. Thank God that wall is down And we have the wall, the kotel. The growth, development, and expansion of the city and the country from infancy to world power is nothing short of miraculous. I would have told my Zayda, and I could only have told it to him up until a few months ago. I would have told my Zayda that the fourth strongest air force in the world is the Air Force of the State of Israel. He would have left in the Air Force, Schmer Force, was redst the Narsch, tap drehen a cup. I can't tell him that anymore because according to Janes of 3 months ago, they've upgraded the Israeli Air Force to the most powerful force in the world. That's not the Rabbeinu Shalom. That's not all Rabbeinu Shalom. Unbelievable. I've been privileged to watch Eretz Yisrael go from food rationing to prophetic abundance. By the way, talking about food rationing, you have to read the story about me and a tomato in the Panovich Yeshiva. If you don't read that, you've missed the whole book. You better go fast. There may not be many copies left. I feel humbled to bear witness to the ingathering of the Jewish people from all four corners of the globe to their ancestral home. What we prayed for and dreamt of for 2,000 years continues to unfold before our very eyes. We talked about the Jews of the Ukraine and the Jews of France. They're coming. They're on the way. They're not going to be refugees. There are no Jewish refugees. Watching from my mirpeset as Highway 1 is being widened yet again. Highway 1. It's already like the 401. You understand? They keep adding lanes and lanes and lanes. And God, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Walking through the inner city, and this we always do, we walk through town and we watch all of the buildings going up. You can imagine what Yerushalayim has turned into. I remember Yerushalayim from 1955. It was a little backwater town. Little backwater town. There's so much that we have been privileged to see in our lives. Hashem fulfilling the promises he made so long ago. The absolute truth of Torah is evident to all whose eyes are open. I'm going to add one little story that just came to me, because that may even be more important than them all. I had a doctor's appointment a few months ago. Until I got to the doctor, the city was so crowded. It was unbelievable. Till I got to the doctor's office. I come into the doctor's office. There's a fellow from Harnof there, the nicest guy of all. The nicest guy of all. And I tell him, "You went through the traffic?" "Yeah, sure." I said, "Hey, can you imagine David HaMelech looking down at this city and he's watching a city teeming with people?" Nice guy. He looks at me and he says, "You know what else David HaMelech sees?" It was that kind of look, like he sees Chil Shabbos, he sees Lashon Hara, he sees this, he sees that. So I'll tell you, since an incident that I had with a balabos here in Toronto 50 years ago, I never tell anybody, "You're wrong." One balabos one day told me, "Rabbi, you're wrong." The rabbi wrong? Rabbis are never wrong. All right? So I never tell anybody you're wrong. This was the first time in 50 years I said, "You're wrong." David HaMelech says, "Ure'ei betuv Yerushalayim kol yemei chayecha." See the good of Yerushalayim. He doesn't see what you see. He's not looking for what you're looking for. He sees the beauty. He sees the good. He's not a professional who's looking for all the dirt that he can find over there. The mitzvah is ure'ei betuv Yerushalayim kol yemei chayecha. You're wrong. Halavai, we should be zeicha l'rot betuv Yerushalayim. Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, those of you who have to get up early in the morning, we understand. But we're going to open the floor. There is a mic right over there if you'd like to be able to ask a question. I'm going to ask Rabbi Gold a two-part question. If anyone would like to ask a question after I'm done, we'll have a few more minutes of questions. You can line up behind that mic over there. Just want to let the gentleman know that Myriv is at 9:45 right next door, if you want to be able to stick around a little bit longer. Rabbi Gold, I'm truly inspired every time I listen to you. Truly inspired, and I think I speak for everyone in this room. But I want to go back to your nostalgia over the Toronto of the late 50s and the 60s. I look at the Rabbi Shalom Gold of today, and I look at the Yeshiva Ner Yisrael of today, and one of three things happened. It changed, you changed, or both changed. Can you clarify that for us, please?
Rabbi Korobkin, you've challenged me, and I'm going to now make a confession that most probably is known to very few people. The first 3 years in the yeshiva, I marked Yom Ha'atzmaut in the yeshiva. I marked Yom Ha'atzmaut not by saying Hallel with a bracha, because listen, I did fear for my life. But what I did was I gave a shir, a sicha, each year on Yom Ha'atzmaut. We celebrated in the yeshiva. I did not. All right, wait. I was in the process of changing then. Now I can't even recognize myself. I've changed so much. But it's obvious that the yeshiva has changed, and I can't understand. My block in Har Nof. Ours is the only apartment that has Israeli flags flying from Yom Ha'atzmaut till after Yom Yerushalayim. It's my wife's mitzvah. Ner Chanukah I light, putting out the flag she does. And it's not only that I'm It's not simply because I enjoy aggravating the kishkis out of everybody else on the block. For 2,000 years, we were good citizens to every fashlug in a country on the face of this earth. In my own country, I'm not going to be proud of it. We got lost many years ago. I made a wrong turn. And I ended up in the middle of Shechem. That's a scary place. When we saw a Jeep with an Israeli flag on it, oh, was that a tremendous feeling. I don't understand my co-religionists. I don't understand the... I can't for the life of me understand. I can't. No. Did that answer your question?
It answers the question as far as what changed or who changed. But really, I think it's a broader question, and I was hoping you could address it because you paint a beautiful, marvelous picture of a very young Jewish community where everyone was together and everyone had normalcy, I guess you could call it. And I think that's something that so many of us pine for, that we have that nostalgia for that normal kind of frumkeit. And today, it's very hard to find that normal middle ground, because there's the polarization to the right, where now you can't even open up a Jewish Heimish magazine and see a woman's picture because that's pasnisht, right? I'm sure that was not the case when you were a bacher. And and then the left seems to be moving further to the left, and with all of the newfangled innovations of orthodoxy on the left side. And it's becoming harder and harder to find that middle ground. The question I'm asking you is, what happened and how do we regain that kind of tamimistic, normal, middle-of-the-road yeshiva world that you represent, or at least to me? How do we get that back, and what happened, and how can we work on getting it back?
I'm most probably going to talk and say all sorts of things in the hope that you'll forget the question that you asked. That first Shabbos that I was here in Toronto, in the morning I davened in a place most probably not you still remember. Burnside? You remember Burnside? I saw you there that morning. You didn't know that you'd become a cousin, you understand. But it's not your fault. I happened to marry your cousin, so what can you do? Business schildig. So, but wait, in the afternoon, I davened and said a shir at Torah Vavoda. In other words, I was an Agudist in the morning. I was a Mizrachist in the afternoon. I could have become very confused. But I do remember one thing. In that Aguda in the morning, I was introduced to an unusual and exceptional man by the name of Reb Chaim Nussbaum, the Chreiner Levracha, one of the great educators of this city. And his Shalom Aleichem to me was, Rabbi Gold, you have one big chesaron, and it gets better every day. He was referring to my youth. You know, every day I got a little older. I don't know what has caused the change. For example, a few months after the establishment of the state, we have the document. 200 Rabbanim signed a petition referring to the state as Reshit Tzmichat Gulatenu. Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach is signed on that. Reb Tzvi Pesach Frank is signed on that. Gedola Yerushalayim. And they mentioned this, of all things, in Mishpacha magazine. And after they describe this Kol Koreh of 1949, they say, you know, how surprising. They don't get it. You're the guys that are surprising. That they ask a question, how could they have done that? They were there. They knew how Klal Yisrael felt. Gegonei Olam. What happened later? I have all sorts of theories, but I really don't know if my theories hold water. I have a feeling that a great deal of it is the influence of an extremely powerful personality called the Satmar Rebbe, to whom I refer in my book. I was a hosbucher by the Satmar Rebbe when he came to. I served him. But I write there that I didn't really know what would happen later. He was a dominant personality. It changed. You see me wearing a gray hat? Okay. I'm the only gray hat in Har Nof. By the way, the poor guys in Har Nof, they don't know what to do with me. They don't know what I am, where I am. And I claim that I'm the one who has remained traditional. I learned in Ponevezh and in Chevron, there wasn't a black hat in the whole yeshiva. We all wore gray hats. Along come these Naya in the 60s, and they start a shtick with black hats and long-sleeve white shirts. That's not the way it was in my days. The Rosh Yeshiva of Ruderman had a light blue long coat. The latter part of his life he wouldn't. The change came from without, and I can come up with all sorts of theories, but it's very, very painful to me. Why You know, I told some of them, for heaven's sake, you've been finding fault with the Medina for 68 years. When will you stop? And in all the finding fault, they can't see the beauty. I learned in yeshiva in 55, you can count the yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael on one hand. The explosion of Torah learning in Eretz Yisrael is unprecedented in all of Jewish history. What more do they want? Now, one of the things, of course, that if you don't tell anybody, and it's just between us, there is no sif in Shulchan Aruch any place that says that one who's learning Torah is part of from the army. There is such a thing. It doesn't exist. I've challenged people, find me a halacha. Where does it say it? But I did find one achron, the Radbag. It's an unknown Radbag. The Radbag gave a heter. Reb David Ben Gurion. At least appreciate, at least see what the other part of Eretz Yisrael has done for you. I have difficulty with it, so you ask me shvere kashas, kvod achav. I have difficulty with it. I have a great deal of difficulty with it. And sometimes, in one of my ugly moments, they're rare, but this is a letter to the editor that I wrote to the Jerusalem Post about 3 years ago. Some fella wrote an article in the Jerusalem Post about why we cannot say the prayer for the state and the prayer for the soldiers. We can make a mishaberach. If the bubba has a running nose, we can make a mishaberach. But you can't do anything else. So I got very upset. The article was such nonsense. So I said, you know what? We've been doing so well without your mishaberach. Let's keep it that way. That was ugly, right?
All right, we have time for maybe one or two more questions. If someone would like to go behind the mic to ask Rabbi Gold any questions. Anyone?
That's good.
Yes, David. Can you go over to the mic so that people can hear you?
I wonder if you can expound. You mentioned the fact that in 1943, the great Rabbi went to Washington to meet with Roosevelt, and he refused to meet with them. And here Netanyahu came to the United States this year to speak to Congress, and of course President Obama refused to be part of that event. And I wonder if you could just expound on where you think President Obama is wrong or right, or perhaps just how the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to do for us without Obama.
I can just say the name Obama does not appear in Touching History from page 1 till the end of the index. So you're asking me a question that's really totally unrelated to what I was saying, but that's okay. I don't mind. I really have no opinions on Obama. I'm not interested in deciding whether he's an anti-Semite. He's not an anti-Semite. He's a Manchurian candidate. He isn't. All that I was interested in is the fact that we have somebody who spoke up, and a world listened. That's all that was important to me. He is insignificant in my life, and he will remain insignificant, and he may be even worse than insignificant, where everything that he's attempting to do is going to blow up. I hope not in our faces. So I don't know what to do. You ask me kashas as difficult as Rabbi Korobkin's. Anybody else has any questions? Let me just take one last word. Number one, thank you very much for coming. You've been a wonderful, wonderful audience. It's been for me. I wouldn't say that it's closing a cycle, but a great part of our history is inextricably intertwined with Toronto. Our children were born here. I became a married man here, no longer a boy, and I'm very grateful to all of you that have come. I'm going to say something now that I don't know. I'll just say it. What's the difference? My wife and I decided you reach a certain age where, what the heck? Who cares? You won't like me, you won't like me. I'm working feverishly on 3 projects now. I'm writing up many of my shiurim. That's going to be in English. I'm writing the Sefer Hashkafa in Hebrew. This book, Touching History, 2 weeks after the book appeared, I get a call from one of my married grandchildren. I'll say it in Hebrew and I'll translate it. It was your anicle. He calls out and he says, Saba, the greatest proof that you have succeeded in life, ein af nechet shiachol likro et hasefer shelcha. Not a single one. There are 2 or 3 who are fighting their way through. There are others that their parents are reading them as bedtime stories about Saba Shmaba. I'm Saba Shmaba. All right. So the book is being translated into Hebrew. And right before I left for Toronto, the publisher told me, this is it. The book sold in 4 or 5 months. The first printing is gone. We have to reprint. So that I'm quite burdened with a lot of financial responsibility. Anybody who wants to help out, anybody who wants to make a dedication of any sort, you can be in touch with me. I have the most prestigious email address in the world. I wouldn't give it up for any of the money in the world. Gold of Jerusalem. Get it straight. It's not Jerusalem of gold. It's gold of Jerusalem at gmail.com. If you can help out, let me know.